Well, hello again, guys, from here inside Lotto Park. Yeah, I dare say you enjoyed that one. A really good night for Newcastle United. And I stood in this exact spot last night and said how important it was that they got that win, not just in the isolation of what it means for their Champions League ambitions, because they've probably got to find 4 wins, 12 points from somewhere to go through, but also going into Nottingham Forest on Sunday. They roll on now with feel-good, with momentum, with confidence. And we saw in the second half there especially, that was much more like it. That was more recognisable. Now, Eddie Howe made a statement, I thought, before the game with his team selection, arguably his strongest 11. What followed as well was a statement performance. Newcastle's first away victory in the Champions League for 22 years and their biggest ever win in this competition. And Eddie Howe was certainly in better spirits when we spoke to him downstairs there now just a few moments ago. Definitely better than he was in the wake of Arsenal on Sunday and Bournemouth again 9 or 10 days ago when I thought Eddie was really low after that. And I understood why, because the team he was watching and the team we were watching, it wasn't recognisable. They weren't much fun to watch. Well, they were there tonight. And Eddie gave us a great quote afterwards. He said, I never set my sides up to be negative. I never want them to be that. I want them to move up the pitch quickly and efficiently as well. He also said, I don't want them to mess about on the ball. You know, you can overcomplicate things with too many passes. I want them to be enjoyable to watch, to entertain. And they certainly did that tonight there. You know, evidenced by the fourth goal. That was real Newcastle, a whiplash break up the pitch involving Gordon, Barnes, Asula, finished by Harvey Barnes at the end there. So there was a lot to like and a lot to enjoy about Newcastle tonight. And the player I'm going to start talking about is perhaps the most enjoyable. I've never seen a footballer like him. He doesn't really look like an athlete, but he's playing like a very good footballer right now, and that is Nick Woltemade. He was the player me and my colleagues spent most of the game talking about. We've just spoken to Eddie about him there. You know, more questions asked on Nick Woltemade than anybody else. And when we have a little debrief in a strong Belgian beer over the road, in 10 minutes, we'll be talking about Nick Woltemade. So yeah, now, to look at his performance there tonight, I know there was a lot on sort of social media inside the first 10, 15, 20 minutes. You know, isn't he great? That was on the back of one good touch. I actually don't think he started the game particularly well. His first 3 involvements, I noted, he did give the ball away. This isn't going to be negative. This is leading to a very positive conclusion and reflection. But I just love, and I've said this before, I like the character with which he plays. I loved in Eddie Howe's answer to the question I asked afterwards when I said to him, were you annoyed that Nick ignored the pre-match protocol, which deemed Anthony Gordon was the designated penalty taker, or were you encouraged by that? He said, no, I love it. I want my strikers to score goals. The very best do. And even though they know their orders, they ignore those orders. And that is what he did. He had to be talked down in the second half there by Sandro Tonali and Kieran Trippier. And likewise in the first half when he wanted to take both spot kicks. So I don't have an issue with that at all. I don't have an issue with it. I actually do. I like it. And that comes back to the point I've made about Woltemade, because his performances aren't perfect. You know, he didn't start the game particularly well. The team, it was a clear instruction. The team were giving him more of the ball. Eddie Howe has spoken to us about this, that need to involve him more, that need to play to his strengths. What does he like? Well, he likes the ball into his feet with his back to goal. Ideally not as deep as it is on halfway, even though the goal leading to the first penalty, he did exactly that. It was his little spin and link-up play on halfway that led to Anthony Elanga having the space on the right. Eddie spoke about that as well. But my quarrel on Sunday and previous games was get the ball into his feet on the edge of the area where, you know, those layoffs might lead to an assist or a goal or something more progressive and promising and threatening than that work on halfway. But nonetheless, during those early stages of the game, it wasn't really coming off from 1 or 2 bounced off him. He lost one when he wanted a free kick, but he never hides, he never shirks. And when you compare him to someone like Benjamin Sesko, and that's a very fair, obvious comparison to make, someone who is playing with shrunken shoulders and no personality and taking that responsibility at Manchester United, Woltemade is, and that for me so far has arguably been his biggest quality, allied to the fact that he's now got 3 goals in 4 games. But then as well, he grew into the game and he did play with that swagger. And there was one turn early in the second half, right on halfway there, where, you know, we've made the comparison to, you know, Rudy Voller on stilts. He looked like Lionel Messi with the double touch, the drop of his shoulder. He got away, you know, he sent 3 Belgian defenders for the chocolates. It was quite incredible. Well, after having been up against Woltemade for 70, 75 minutes, they'll probably need one of those strong beers as well, because he grew into the game and he got better and better. And the goal as well. Now, I was convinced on first view and that it wasn't his, the Sandro Tonali shot, but to have that, and that's what he's got about him, you know, he's got that impudence and that imagination to try that little flick. He got the faintest of touches on it, and it goes in via the defender. And on the back of a week as well, we were inside talking to Eddie 24 hours ago. Again, it was all about Nick Woltemade and the comments of Karl-Heinz Rummenigge saying that Newcastle were fools for paying that £69 million. Woltemade would have seen that. A different player might have shrunk. A different player might have been impacted negatively by it. He's not, and arguably for me so far, that has been his greatest quality. When there are no other centre forwards at the club right now, when Johan Wissa is injured and he's been pitched in sooner than he perhaps would have wanted to play, to turn up, to never shy away, to put himself in those positions where, coming into this game, he'd scored with his only 2 chances so far. What was more encouraging tonight was, even though I think it probably was his only chance, but he looked like getting on the end of more. There was one in the second half when he set Anthony Elanga free, and Anthony Elanga should actually square it, and Woltemade's got to tap in. He looked more like scoring goals tonight, and I thought that was really encouraging. So this idea that, Newcastle are fools, well, 3 goals from 4 starts, I'm sorry, but, fools, Karl-Heinz Rummenigge is starting to look like something of a plonker on the back of that, and ultimately it will be, I think, Bayern Munich who are making their words on Woltemade, because while there was work to do, wasn't it a perfect, brilliant performance from him? No, it wasn't, but I thought it was his best yet. I really did. Real flashes of skill and that want and that desire to be involved, and clearly the tactic and the strategy from Eddie Howe for those players to involve him more and to be around him and to bounce off him. That was definitely the best night in terms of Woltemade individually and the collective of how they played with him. Now, what about the wider team performance? Now, this had the potential to be a really difficult night for Newcastle, given USG, our Belgian champions, current league leaders, won their opening game against PSV. But Newcastle, what could have been a hard night, they made it look easy in the end. A really strong, professional, classy, clinical performance, So I understand why Eddie Howe was as pleased as he was downstairs. But he also said as well, it's a start. It's something that gives them encouragement, gives them something to take into Nottingham Forest on Sunday and then beyond. And I would go along with this because I wouldn't want to get too carried away. I was actually pretty disappointed by USG. Now, I expected more from them. Can Newcastle do any more than what they did? No, that is to take nothing away from them. But before we jumped, the conclusions of Newcastle are back, the emphasis now, the challenge now is go and follow it up, because as we saw against Bradford a week ago when Newcastle scored 4 goals, and I spoke afterwards about rediscovering that touch and that feel good and the confidence and everything else, they didn't really follow through on that against Arsenal. I was really disappointed with the nature of the performance against Arsenal. I was talking to one fan last night who said he thought Newcastle went defensive too early trying to protect that lead. I said, what do you mean went defensive too early? They never really went attacking. That was my big gripe against Arsenal. They didn't play like the team I recognise and I enjoy, but they did here tonight, and it was a fast start. I said there I wasn't that impressed by USG. They went toe-to-toe with Newcastle in the first 5 or 10 minutes. It's a great press box here. You really are right on top of the pitch, and it was a good atmosphere, definitely supplied and helped by the 700-800 Geordies that were there away behind the goal. And from the start, I thought Newcastle, you can tell when this team have turned up. Invariably, they turn up 9 times out of 10. But while I had that worry on Sunday, I didn't here tonight, and it was frenetic, it was noisy, and Newcastle were the better team during those opening 10, 15 minutes. They get the opening goal, and again, Anthony Elanga, I spoke in the preview video about the wingers, about the 4 wingers and their contributions, only 1 goal and 1 assist between them so far. Well, tonight, while Elanga, do you credit the assist with the award of the penalty? It doesn't really matter, just look at his performance. It was so much better. Can it be more improved in terms of output? Yes, I think it probably can. There was 1 cross in the first half where he got away and it sails out of play. There was 1 in the second half there where he goes through. He should either square it for Woltemade or score a goal. It's a good shot, but I think he might have done a little bit better on reflection in that scenario. But on the whole, he got the official man of the match at the end there. Would I have a massive complaint with that? My man of the match is different, by the way. We'll get to the merit stars, but no, I wouldn't. I thought it was encouraging, and that'll do a lot for him. And on the back of that, Harvey Barnes coming on and getting the goal. Anthony Elanga exploited the space. During the first half, Anthony Gordon scored the 2 goals, the 2 penalties, and has probably produced his best performance of the season so far. But during the first half, when Newcastle set that tone and, imposed themselves as the better team, it was Elanga doing more than most to create that, getting away repeatedly down the right, even if, to go back to that point, that finishing touch will come. But we saw him using his pace to good effect. I spoke about that in the preview video. A very fast player who doesn't quite yet know how to use his pace for Newcastle, and his teammates, by extension of that, don't know how to exploit it too. They did there tonight, so that was really encouraging. You think of Anthony Gordon, another one of that wing quartet on the opposite side there. Got away once or twice in the first half, had a good start, but certainly in the second half, that was more like it. And I want to go back to Gordon, because I think I was maybe a little bit harsh on him in terms of the analysis last night, because I think Anthony Gordon's only played once on the wing so far this season. He's been suspended for 3 games, and apart from that, he's been asked to go through the middle. But there again on the left, and my message to Eddie Howe, is he listening? I don't know if he cares, even if he is. But play Anthony Gordon as a left winger. He does okay through the middle, but you lose so much by him not being in that position and attacking from those areas. And he's part in the 4th goal there at the start of that break, I thought was fantastic. So really encouraging that those players, because Eddie said last night, that when the wingers don't operate in a 4-3-3 system with such an emphasis on those players going forward and going back over, when they don't perform, it does really hurt the team. There tonight, that was much more like it. And Barnes' finish as well, a player who probably will be a little bit low on confidence. He's actually, having had no real opposition to the left wing jersey, with Anthony Gordon having to go through the middle, he quite remarkably played his way out of the team, and I don't think he could have any quarrel with that. So that there will do him the world of good. Will Asula coming on now. Nick Woltemade can't play every minute of every game while Visser is out, but Asula against Bradford last week with the 2 goals, and he come on there and he was super lively. He might even have got a goal himself. So I'm going through the entire team pretty much here, all really encouraging, and just for that feel around themselves, because there had been a little bit of a negative narrative. It's not easy to say, a negative narrative, just beginning to gain a little bit of momentum, and people from the outside looking in and asking, why aren't this team scoring goals? In the wake of Alexander Isak going to Liverpool, even though it isn't really working out for him. I watched that game in town last night. How are they going to get goals? Well, they put the 4 past Bradford, and they put the 4 past Union Saint-Gilles here tonight. Now go and take that into Nottingham Forest on Sunday, and what is another huge game. And why wouldn't a victory and a performance like that there tonight just set them up and just calm things going into that October international break? Now the merit stars, I think I've made 3 big omissions here tonight, because I think there was a short list of 6. Is that a short list? I know that's more of a long list, isn't it? I think there was a long list of 6 competing for the podium. I'm fascinated to know what you think. So I'm going to leave the 3 who have missed out from my long list. I'm going to mention them afterwards. I'm going to stick to the rules. It's better when you keep it that way. Now the 1 star goes to Anthony Gordon for reasons I've already outlined. His best performance of the season so far, and just a player who, if Newcastle are to snap from this little funk they've been in during the opening weeks of the season, Anthony Gordon is going to be absolutely key and absolutely central to that. And I love the fact, that, and so that Eddie Howe, that Nick Woltemade wanted those penalties. I love the fact even more that Anthony Gordon wasn't going to give them to him. He knows that what those goals can do for him, for that belief, and didn't he put the pair of them away brilliantly? And it was good that Eddie Howe revealed with us afterwards, that Gordon actually in training has been working repeatedly on his technique from 12 yards. Eddie is seeing that, and that is why that dedication and that want and that desire to take on that responsibility is why he is now the designated. Before I've had one of the left ear blondes, the designated. It's not an easy word to say, with or without beer. It's why he is going to be the designated penalty taker in the wake of Alexander Isak. So 1 star for Anthony Gordon. The 2 penalties stepping up, but also as well around that a much more threatening front foot performance. 2 stars. They go to Sandro Tonali. I haven't mentioned him in this video so far, and he might not get a lot of the fanfare around this. Elanga got the official man of the match, and there's other players we are going to speak about. But I just thought Tonali was brilliant again tonight. I was convinced that opening goal was his as well, and that's a big ask of him now. I know that Eddie is a little bit frustrated with the goal contribution. As much as he spoke about the wingers last night, he wants to see more from the midfielders. He knows they are capable, Joe Linton, Bruno Tonali, of scoring more goals. But wasn't he just so athletic tonight? He's an incredible player to watch. And when you see him in person, when you hear live as well, and the manner in which he gallops across the turf, there's just something so aesthetically pleasing about him. Whereas Nick Woltemade sometimes is a little bit awkward on the eye, Tonali is just he's just a gladiator. He really is. And the way he moves with that absolute majesty, just everything about him. And on a big Champions League night, he looked like a Champions League player. And during the early part of the game, when Newcastle had to seize that control and that superiority, who was it who puffed their chest out and made it about them? I thought that was Sandro Tonali. And I love that about him. And because I felt that, and the more the game went on, and like I say, the story shifted elsewhere, I didn't want to forget that. I think Tonali, 2 stars. And the 3, well, they go to Nick Woltemade. Now, that might give you a clue as to some of those who I've left out who played very well tonight. But yeah, just after I've already spoken about this, but after a week when the guy is constantly in the news, you know, for better or worse, you know, analysis, support, criticism, whatever it may be, there's just a lot of noise around him right now. But every time he's coming out and he's wearing it and he's carrying it. And that tonight, especially in the second half when the game became a little bit more stretched and Newcastle at their best, they do play on the break. And I've wondered, I've looked at Woltemade during the early weeks and I've thought, where does he fit into how Newcastle play at their best? You know, can he actually be part of that? Well, we saw tonight in the second half that he can get those balls, that he can come deep, bring his centre-back with him. And the tactic and the strategy on the back of that has then got to be to the wingers, to Elanga, to Gordon. If he's come too halfway or into the centre circle, that has automatically got to mean the space in behind. You get into it because he'll get the ball and he'll turn and he'll find you. He did that countless times in the second half. Lovely little quick double touches, dropping a shoulder, then finding the pass to go with it. And what I liked even more about it was after making the pass, he didn't just admire it or he didn't not have the legs or the energy to get on the end of it. He did start charging upfield. And if you see that more over time, that is how it's going to work. That's how Eddie Howe sees Nick Woltemade being effective and impactful in a team that might not have to look a whole lot drastically different as to how it did last season. But as I said, a little asterisk applied to it all. This is one game, and it was against what I thought was a disappointing USG, but certainly positives to take from it, and another huge positive leap and step forward for Nick Woltemade. But the unlucky trio who missed out, well, they are Nick Pope, Sven Botman, and Anthony Elanga as well. I've already spoken about Elanga, a good night. Still want to see more from him in terms of conversion, but a really, really promising night. Sven Botman, well, he looks like a Royal Marine. He looks like Special Forces, doesn't he? And he is just, he plays with strength, with stealth. And at one point during the game, I was convinced he was going to be among the merit stars. Another brilliant performance. And that's 4 starts now in a pretty short space of time. And for him to hold up physically, that's what Eddie Howe said afterwards. That is perhaps the most encouraging of all, you know, ignoring the fact that he's played fantastically well during that period. I always thought the performances would come with fitness. So isn't it encouraging that he has stayed free of injury and he's got better with every game? And if that means Dan Burn going out a left back, I don't necessarily like that, but that's the call Eddie's got to make. And if that's a consequence of it, because Sven Botman really is absolutely top class. And I've just asked Eddie in the press conference there, how is he not being capped yet by Holland? He said, well, that is surely to follow, perhaps very shortly as well when the Dutch squad is named at the end of this week. Nick Pope as well missed out on the stars. Now, you know, can you put Nick Pope on the podium when the team have scored 4 goals at their end and it's not really a game-changing impact? No, you probably can't. But on the back of criticism on Sunday for his part in that Arsenal winning goal, the quick ball downfield that didn't work, and he spun somehow, you know, an absolutely world-class, brilliant performance. He left the game coming out of that, you know, the source of criticism. I thought he responded brilliantly in the saves he had to make, and there were a few, you know, there were 4 or 5 he's had to make good saves. I think one of them came at 1-0, there was another one at 2-0 when a goal might have just changed the atmosphere in here. So credit as well to Nick Pope. I said there 3 have missed out. Another one's coming to my head on the back of that. Malik Chow as well. Malik Chow is just slotted in seamlessly. He looks like a Champions League player. I still think there might be a little bit more aggression to come from him. In the, you know, Eddie and the coaching staff can work on that. But that partnership that's emerging between Chow and Botman, and on the back of, you know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, the partnership being Shea and Dan Burn, and how wonderful that was and still can be and still will be. But how well stocked are they at centre half? So in summary, guys, yeah, I've gone all around the pitch there, haven't I? And there are reasons to be cheerful in every department. But as Eddie said, and as I will say, take that into Forest now on Sunday and finish this little period on a real high. Tell me what you think, you know, if you do come down from that, because that was a really enjoyable night. And they have been in short supply so far this season of that nature. I know there was the win against Wolves. I will say Wolves when I talk about Woltemade, the win against Wolves, but that was the best night of the season so far for you guys and for Newcastle, for the players and for Eddie. So tell me what you think below the line. Like, comment, subscribe. Loads to get stuck into. Do you agree with my merit marks? I dare say, you know, a few of you will disagree, but we'll be disagreeing, I think, in good spirit and with, you know, the best possible intentions. So yeah, guys, I'll see you back up at the training ground on Friday when we're looking ahead to that huge one against Nottingham Forest. One last little scan of this place on what was a thoroughly enjoyable night. Okay, guys, good night. Bye-bye.